page. So Rob Smith from CURTA will be introducing our speakers, so I'll pass things off to Rob.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for the opportunity to join with Soup with Substance and the Office of International Education today. We're going to talk a little bit about two intersecting projects. And the projects really reflect a whole range of components to what we do on campus regarding some really important campus strategies associated with engagement and outreach, and also what we refer to often as retention strategies, high impact retention strategies, with study abroad being one of these very, very important ways in which we engage our students, both in terms of the experiences, but also in important curricular developments. And so I'm going to give a quick overview of the project, and then I'm going to bring into conversation with us the folks who've been working on this project over the last year or so. And we have a guest. I don't see Jay in the chat yet, but I'll get to that. This project includes Grace Alvarez and Marie Gunn, Jay Ferguson III, and myself. And really quickly, what the broader project entails is examining these important relationships that were fostered in the 1970s and 80s that brought together human rights lawyers from the United States, a large number of civil rights attorneys from the United States, and human rights lawyers in South Africa, very specifically related to the Black Lawyers Association in South Africa. Although when you joined, you heard the wonderful sounds of Fela Kuti, who's obviously a legend in Afrobeat and an important voice in resistance and radical movements across the globe out of West Africa. I want to make sure to say that indeed he's a West African, and we're talking about South Africa. I wanted to make sure to just emphasize that. And so the project is charting how these communities of human rights lawyers find one another, how they exchange ideas across that big pond, and then ultimately what they're able to create as a means of engaging law and constitutionalism in the fight against apartheid in the 1980s primarily. And so that's the big project. That's the overarching effort. And this project actually began with me in probably 10 or 12 years ago now, when I was working in Charlotte, North Carolina. I worked on a research project that was a case study in landmark Title VII employment discrimination cases. One case in particular, Griggs versus Duke Power, is referred to as the Brown versus Board of Education for Employment Equality. And as I'm doing interviews with these lawyers who argued and won the case, they kept talking about the work that they did in South Africa. They said, oh, we got colleagues in South Africa who are grappling with some similar employment issues, and we've been partnering with them, and yada, yada, yada. And so at one point I stopped the tape and I said, well, what is this partnership in South Africa? And that spawned, as I was finishing up that project, that spawned this particular effort. And so what you're going to hear about is, one, the relationships that forged in the creation of the Black Lawyers Association's Legal Education Center and Trial Advocacy Program. So I don't want to give that story away. You'll hear about that. But this summer, we started working on a comparable project. We, as in myself, and then Grace joined us along with Jay Ferguson, where we began the process of developing an oral history of James E. Ferguson, Jay's dad, who was one of the key individuals from the U.S. to take part in this project. And so we're going to tell you a little bit about the trial advocacy program that was the outcome of these transnational relationships. And then at the same time, you're going to hear a little bit about James Ferguson, who his nickname's Fergie, who is this really important voice in civil rights legal activism here in the United States and obviously globally. I do want to say a couple of things first before I get Ann and Grace into the conversation. One, I want to publicly apologize to SharePoint and Teams. I've been a critic of SharePoint in Teams. What you see here in terms of our presentation was built in SharePoint. And so I was in SharePoint pulling up images, and it was just giving us all these remarkable images from South Africa and other places. I had no idea what we could do with PowerPoints and whatnot in the SharePoint system, and also didn't realize how smooth Teams would work with it. So, you know, I guess I'll stop critiquing Teams and SharePoint. All righty, so Jay, I don't see, Jay's not with us yet, is he? Ann or Grace, you don't see him on the call, do you? Okay. All right, this project, as much as it's an important conversation about how legal activists work together, about the role of law in challenging systems of oppression, and particularly the emergence of constitutionalism in South Africa in the 90s, it wraps all that together. But really, this is, for today's purposes, a great example of engaged scholarship and partnerships. And the first thing I have to do is just send a huge shout out to the Office of International Education and the work that is being done in collaboration with the University of the Western Cape. I see Carly on the call. You know, you all's work is so important and beneficial to our students, and then also obviously to the faculty and staff who partner with you in those efforts. And so thank you so very much for welcoming Curto into your world and into your efforts around international education. We are very thankful. One of our, as part of what we do in Curto, we always have community experts at the table with us, not only in a partnering way, but also as a part of the fashioning and the shaping of all of our projects. And Jay Ferguson, the son of James Ferguson, is a longtime friend, and I began doing some oral history projects and some other work when I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I wish Jay was on the call. He may join us if he gets a minute, but Jay really showed me around Charlotte, North Carolina, and he really opened up the city to me so that I could be a more effective faculty person and historian there in the city. And he really walked me into a whole range of collaborations and gave me the opportunity to work not only with the legal community there in the city and across the state, but then also with a number of the history-related organizations. So I just wanted to shout Jay out as well. You're going to hear a little bit about James Ferguson in just a second. And what we're going to do is actually show you some videos of some of the folks we've been interviewing and whatnot. And so that's a short overview of what the project entails. It's both this examination of the relationships that these lawyers and legal activists build, but it's also an opportunity to herald the life of an important voice in our movement for equality, the broader movements for equality, James Ferguson, a name you may not know, a name that many folks may not have heard of yet, but he is certainly a very important voice and expert in the field of civil rights law. So I'm going to turn it over to Ann and Grace. Ann, why don't you start and just tell us a little bit about how you got into this project and your experience with studying abroad as the pandemic emerged.
Sure, yeah. So I walked into Rob's office one day and kind of just asked him what projects were going on and what was available in terms of working for him. And I was interested in a lot of the research he had going on, and we got to talking, and he told me about this South Africa project, and I was like, well, I'm going there next semester. So the second semester last year, I studied abroad at University of Western Cape in Cape Town. And I was supposed to be doing this research on the South African side of this project, looking at the lawyers that James Ferguson had connected with and looking at the archives there. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, I was sent home about halfway through the program, which, was not the best situation to be in, but because of how the virus spread, we were kind of aware that we were going to get sent home early at a certain point. And so we were really able to take advantage of those last couple weeks that we had in Cape Town. And I want to go back there someday. I want to kind of get that time back. And even more so with this project, it has been really cool to see the connections between civil rights work here in the US and anti-apartheid work in Cape Town, and throughout South Africa in general. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of background on like how I got involved in this project. So coming home over the summer, I was really able to just kind of dive full force into this project with Rob and look at the United States perspective of this trial advocacy program that was started in South Africa by James Ferguson and Ken Brown, who you'll see that later in the videos, which I want to get to. But first, I'll let Grace take over a little bit and tell her how she got involved and just what any other insights that she wants to share with you guys.
Hi there, my name's Grace, and over the summer I had heard from a few different faculty members, you should really look into Curdo, you should look into Curdo. And while I didn't really have the opportunity or do that, Anne Marie one day texted me and said, hey, I think I have this great project that like I'm working on and want to expand who's on the project. And at that point I did not know like what was going on, but I already said yes. And I was just excited to know like this happened to fall on my doorstep. So I can't really fully explain like the gratitude and pride of being a part of this project. Just being in this office has been really, really amazing to see the works of other people. And through the semester, I've just sort of caught up on what Anne Marie and Rob already know. So I'm just really glad and excited for us to be able to share the project with you guys and just show everybody else what free was like. So I'll hand it back to Rob and see if there's anything we should do next.
Yeah, thank you all very much. They kind of undersold it a little bit. Let me offer a little more depth to that. Anne Marie was actually in the process of digging into the archives at the University of the Western Cape, which tells, among the many stories, really helps to tell the story of how the moment of transition was very much informed by the efforts of the lawyers who came through the trial advocacy program and the emergence of the Constitutional Court. And also, it's important for me to say that when Grace joined us, it was as if she had been a part of the project the whole time. She just kind of moved right in, understood where we were headed, and really just seamlessly joined us. And so I can't say enough about how important it is that when we have when we have the opportunity to engage our students, to really give them the latitude to be creative and to bring their own ideas and expertise to the table, and they've done that. And so I really want to herald you all. You all are doing a wonderful job. All righty. Black Lawyers Association Legal Education Center. You know, so much of this historically, you know, is a way to think about the comparative spaces around Jim Crow and apartheid. These two systems of racial colonialism, these two systems of white supremacy. They look slightly different, obviously, because the countries are different, but the architecture, if you will, is very similar because of the ways that law and policy structured those systems and really suffocated folks from out of any sense of full citizenship in their own countries. And so we want to connect those two in a comparative sense to highlight how they're similar and how they're different. It's also an important connection to the history of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. The lawyer whose name we all know probably is Thurgood Marshall. We should also know the name Charles Hamilton Houston, who was his mentor. And what happens, of course, throughout the 20th century is that alongside movements for racial equality, there are these very important landmark legal victories that help to open up the various opportunities by using the Constitution to fundamentally declare the various expressions of Jim Crow, the various expressions of our own U.S. version of apartheid as unconstitutional. And so what we're exploring is this second generation of civil rights attorneys who pick up the mantle from Thurgood Marshall and others and carry these this canon, this legal canon into the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and currently. So it's also important that we just highlight the role of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. There's also one organization that is really critical in this project, and that's the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law and their Southern Africa project. Standing next to Nelson Mandela as he cast his first vote is a woman, Gay McDougall, out of Georgia, who is the longtime director of the Lawyers Committee and really was a very central part of how these legal activists were able to connect with one another and stay connected and support one another's efforts. There are literally dozens upon dozens upon dozens of legal minds that were a part of this, and this was a global effort. And so we used the term human rights lawyers to envelop all of the folks from various parts of the world who took part. I was actually in an archive in Columbia University going through the Lawyers Committee's records, and you could just see one fax after another moving across the Atlantic, communicating these very high-level legal ideas and ideologies, and you can just see the relationships forming, and you can see the goals of the restructuring of the legal system at work. You can just see it all happen, and I want to make sure that we also just highlight the importance of Gay McDougall in the role of connecting these human rights lawyers from various parts of the globe. I also want to make sure we say just a little bit anti-apartheid movements, and I think it's depending on how old you are, if you happen to be, of that generation, anti-apartheid movements were central to the formation of many of us in the 1980s, especially. In the 1970s, we saw student protests in Soweto and the way that the state violently crushed the students' voices, and yet they still continue to resist and to be engaged in those anti-apartheid struggles. We know that the history of Nelson Mandela's incarceration was also a part of that moment and his release from prison. I think we could all probably tell the story of the day that it happened and where you were, what you were doing. When I found out about it, I was in the electrical engineering building at Purdue University, and my dear friend Telva Johnson, who I share a birthday with, she said, "Rob, Nelson Mandela's free." We were standing in the hallway. I can remember it very vividly, and I bet many of us can remember that moment where we heard the news, and to know what we didn't know then was that Nelson Mandela would go on to be one of the world's greatest leaders. There's no way we could have known it at the time, but to live and experience and go through that process was very remarkable. The first student-led protest I attended as a freshman in college was an anti-apartheid rally. I was sitting in a production of Serafina at college, and a protest erupted in the middle of that performance. And so much of that anti-apartheid moment and those movements were certainly a part of the 1980s and early 90s. All righty, so we've talked a little bit. We've done a little bit of an overview. Now it's time for us to move to the videos. And this might require me to do a little bit of finessing with the screen sharing, but Anne or Grace, would either of you like to introduce the videos and just tell me which one you want me to show first?
Okay, so first of all, Grace did a lot of the work in terms of picking out which clips were important to show you guys. So I just want to share how thankful I am for her to do all of that tedious work. I did the editing, so it was a team effort. But I think that first it would be good to show James Ferguson kind of explaining the trial advocacy program. Either that one or the Ken Brown one. I think either one gives a good intro to the trial advocacy program. Yeah, so either one to start is good.
And I think we know this now. We probably did not highlight it significantly enough early on, but because of the pandemic, we had to figure out how to keep the project going, how to usher in the oral history project of James Ferguson. And one day we were meeting and it was like, well, why don't we just do a bunch of Zoom videos? Why don't we just do a bunch of Zoom interviews? And that's pretty much what we did to keep the project going. So we'll start with how about we start with Fergie?
And just a reminder, Rob, do you know if you're sharing your sound too when you shared your screen?
I really hope that I am.
Okay.
I tested this beforehand, so let's hope so.
Okay.
All right. And I think more than anything else, let me make sure I get to the right video. All right.
Greatest experiences of my life was when I went down the South. It's easy for me to talk about because that's one of the greatest experiences of my life was when I went down to South Africa with Ken and we started that trial advocacy program. Now, Ken probably told you that when we did that program in South Africa, that was the first trial advocacy program of any kind that they had in South Africa. By trial advocacy, we mean as a teaching mechanism, we're talking about teaching lawyers how to be effective and persuasive in court. When we talk about persuasion, we're talking about persuading the fact finder. It might be a jury, or it might be a judge. Okay. And that's important because here in America, we have jury trials all the time. And when people think of trials, they think of jury trials. But in teaching trial advocacy, the NITA method, as we came to call it, we're focusing primarily on jury trials and persuasion of jurors to see the lawyer's point of view and perspective. Now, South Africa is different in that in South Africa, both now and at the time we started the program there in 1986, South Africa did not have jury trials because a jury trial is inconsistent with apartheid. In that, with South Africa being 87% Black when we were there and 13% white, that would mean that your juries, if they were fairly chosen, would be heavily Black. South Africa was a very oppressive political system for Black South Africans. That's what apartheid really was all about. It was segregation of the races and subjugation of Black South Africans. In South Africa, everything was divided along racial lines. But I'm told that at a point when the architects of apartheid, the Dutch who imposed it in South Africa, when they got ready to impose it, they came to America and studied American segregation. And they took what they learned here, and I'm sure elsewhere, and tried to perfect that. If there was going to be racial segregation and separation, as there was, it had to be more strictly enforced than it was in America for the simple fact that South Africa was about 87% Black.
Right.
So without the strict enforcement of apartheid laws, it never could have worked. Black lawyers in South Africa had been so extremely marginalized by apartheid that they were in need of whatever help they could get in developing the skills of advocacy in an effort to overturn apartheid. While we were there, we saw the fall of apartheid, and we saw Black South Africans become judges right on up to the highest court in South Africa. And we saw the development in South Africa of what they called their constitutional court. And it worked not so much as a result of Ken's and my participation, but I think it worked because we were able to get Black and white lawyers in South Africa to work with us in providing the training for the lawyers who came through the program. The lawyers who came through the program were predominantly Black South African lawyers, but it was open to white lawyers as well. And I have never in my life seen such dedication and commitment as I saw among the Black lawyers in particular who came to this program. They wanted to learn, they wanted to consume everything this program had to offer. They wanted to do any and everything they could to become better advocates and to be able to use the skills that they learned and developed in the NITA program to help bring about change in South Africa, to help get rid of this cruel thing called apartheid.
So really quickly, that's James Ferguson. That's a quick peek into Fergie, as he likes to go by. Just a little bit more background. James Ferguson is originally from Asheville, North Carolina. He is the one of the founders of the law firm Chambers, Ferguson and Stein, which was one of the first biracial law firms in the South, created in the 1960s. His firm also was a part of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund's cooperating attorney program. And what that means is that for so many of the civil rights legal victories, the cases were handled at the local level by local attorneys and then would be turned over to the National Legal Defense Fund office. And so somewhere in the late 70s, there began a conversation with multiple communities of legal minds from both countries. The Black Lawyers Association is formed around the same time with some key folks who were contemporaries and a part of the legal fraternity that Nelson Mandela was a part of there in South Africa. And then as the Black Lawyers Association emerges, there becomes this rich involvement from other legal activists from across the globe as a part of this trial advocacy program, the acronym NITA that he mentions, the National Institute of Trial Advocacy. And essentially what trial advocacy means is there would be extended workshops about filing briefs, how to effectively file them, how to shape and pattern arguments in the courtroom, how to do the right kinds of interviews and how to explore the right topics in interviews so that, as Fergie mentioned, when folks get into trial, they just come far more equipped and more thorough in their practice. So now, well, Ann or Grace, do you want to add anything else, or should we go right to Kim Brown? All right, we'll go to Kim Brown next. Kim Brown is a professor in the law school at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, longtime friend of James Ferguson and one of the early partners in the trial advocacy program.
Rob, this interview also has Majanku in it.
It does? Okay, great. And Majanku Gumbi would be how we would generally refer to as Attorney General, kind of. Is not a direct correlation, but the way that we've come to understand her role, she was one of the folks that worked in Mandela's cabinet as something kind of what we might think of as an attorney general.
The enormous impact that Fergie personally had in South Africa I think people appreciated me, and I have many friends, and I feel very honored to be a part of that. But Fergie was something special. He was viewed as the leader of our group, certainly. But not only that, but I believe that Fergie could have run for high office in South Africa after the end of apartheid and be elected in a landslide. He was a force that would come in, and he would enter a room and he would attract people. Fergie and I, talked about it. We had no idea what we're doing. We had no idea what the South African system was. No idea what we learned about teaching trial advocacy in the U.S. would translate into South Africa. But we read a little bit and found it was so similar to the British system that a lot of what we did would work. But we were all very careful, Fergie and I in particular. This was their revolution. And we were not going to advise them unless asked how to do it. But we were asked, and we were asked, particularly Fergie was much more valuable than I was, talking about civil rights litigation in the U.S. I think that what we were trying to do was to provide the tools to Black lawyers to effectively represent, first of all, individuals who were under the thumb of the government, under the foot of the government. Mm-hmm. Try to provide them tools to help individuals, but also the legal tools to the extent that it was possible to challenge the apartheid system in the courts. That was our hope. And we also thought that we would develop a core of outstanding Black lawyers who could themselves be teachers. To some extent, we succeeded in that because we helped develop some outstanding lawyers. Trouble is, they became so successful that they didn't have much time for teaching.
And then we had all these projects which were meant to empower Black lawyers, which included trial advocates, which I ran. So the primary objective was to make sure that come independence, because by then we could see where things were going, is to make sure that come independence, we have sufficiently trained lawyers, Black, who can step into key roles that the new state would need. And without jumping ahead, I'm proud to say that if you look at the bench now, I think 90% of appointees, Black appointees, are from the Black Lawyers Association. And people acknowledge that, the work we put into training. So that trial advocacy has been extremely successful. And I can't even just a week ago, I met lawyers who were like, oh, we haven't seen you in a while. We used to see you more when we did trial advocacy. I mean, we are all old now. but it really, it really changed the complexion of the bench so much because it also, it's about confidence. Mm-hmm. To say, I can do this. Yeah. I know what to look for, even both as a lawyer and as a judge. When people appear before me, this is how you conduct a trial. These are the key issues that you look out for, and all of that. And it really is amazing that I really look back at it and say, I can't believe it. That most of our judges went through that program.
And so those are just some clips, and you all did a great job putting those clips together. That's really nice. You know, but when we had these folks, obviously we were going through not only a pandemic, but this significant upsurge in Black liberation movements here in the U.S., and those began to spill out into other countries, and then we started to see similar kinds of conversations about state oppression being connected in the second half or so of the year, from May throughout, and we know that there's still this very simmering reality associated with those movements today, even amidst our winter months. And so we didn't want to miss the opportunity to get some of these folks talking about the moment that we were in. And so the next set of clips we're going to show are the interviewees responding to that question. Just tell us about this moment. What are you seeing? What are your thoughts? What are your reflections? And so we did not want to miss the opportunity to hear from them about the moment that we were in. And so here is their thoughts.
I was so happy and pleased to see the enormous outpouring of frustration in way of these protests which occurred over the summer. They were probably most directly in response to the televised killing of George Floyd. But as you know, there have been many others who were killed, some also videotaped. There are really so many names of people who we now know about and who have been brought to the public's attention. But then there are others that we know suffered similar fates. And if not death, then some severe beatings and other excessive injuries from excessive force. But I personally do not accept this slogan, defund the police, as an answer to the problems which are caused by the behavior that we have seen in police departments. There is a viable and necessary function for public safety officers in our community. I am supportive of the efforts to remove resources from the police department that could be spent better on community services, so separating social work away from police work is necessary so that people who are in need of those services can access them through avenues which do not have attached to them the potential for some criminal ramifications.
Yeah.
Within some police departments, some efforts are being made to do community outreach. They should continue that, but that's not the substitute for the social work and the mental health work and, work just to eradicate poverty, which is a source of a lot of our problems. Yeah. Can't all be done under this umbrella that we call police departments or public safety divisions. Mm-hmm. And so the notion that police departments should not be, quote, overfunded to engage in almost martial law type behavior against the community is certainly something that I support. But the notion of defunding a police department in its entirety is not something that I support.
The one positive thing is I think there are more young people involved who really care about this.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that may be different. That's the optimistic side of me that says that maybe that is. I've got young adult and teenage grandchildren, and I see them getting more and more involved and more interested in doing things, not just simply talking about it and getting out and trying to change things. So maybe we're at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's almost like 1976 all over again for some of us to see what's happening in the U.S. And I'm not the one to tell you guys what's going on, but I think that you know, in many ways, for me, the Trump administration has allowed the racism that has just been on the surface to find expression. And that's why you see, even just yesterday, I was watching things that you wouldn't associate with the US, of just gross barbarism, I would call it. And you know, the enabling environment that is created is what allows the police people and the law enforcement to respond in the way they would respond to a woman saying, there's a black man here following me. It says something to the police, and they would react differently if she had just said, there's a man following me. And I think that the racism that has always been there in the US has been given space.
Today presents an interesting time, but I think it also presents an inevitable time. We don't know exactly where we are, we don't know exactly where we're going, but I see it as progress along the road to achieving racial equality. I think we're still a long way from it. I think the main thing is for young people to realize that our movement towards racial justice has always depended very heavily on young people. And I'm grateful for that, I'm thankful for that, and I'm especially appreciative to see young people taking up the mantle and moving us forward as far as we can go at this time. I don't delude myself into thinking that this is it. Finally, we're going to see the onset of racial equality in America. While I won't predict what the outcome of all of this will be, I can say with all candor that it will be an indication of some progress. Just how much progress, we'll have to wait until the passage of time to determine that.
All righty. Nice job, folks. Way to edit those videos. You all did a wonderful job with that. Yeah, and so that's what we were up to this summer. That's the project. The project includes exploring these rich relationships between human rights legal activists from both countries and folks from other parts of the world. It's also a project that has a subset of oral history collections regarding the life and legal career of James E. Ferguson, and we were able to do some really rich interviewing amidst the pandemic, and Zoom allows us to communicate with our friends from all parts of the globe, and teams as well. But it's been an interesting journey to hear these stories, and we look forward to more of them. And so we've got about 10 minutes left. How about we halt there? And if anybody has any questions, thoughts, reflections, please jump on in. I'd love to hear folks share the moment when they heard about Nelson Mandela being freed. That would be great if anybody wants to share those stories. I also, really quickly, the Milwaukee Public Museum is bringing an exhibit focused on Nelson Mandela later this spring, and so you all will be hearing much more about that. There's several of us on campus, including folks from the Office of International Education, who are engaged in that process. So Thank you all very much. And Grace, you want to say anything in parting? No, that's it.
If anyone has any questions, go ahead.
Cool. Thank you all very much.
Hi, Rob.
Hey,
Thank you guys. Hey, so much for this Soup with Substance. This has been incredibly enlightening. And to your question about learning about Nelson Mandela's freedom, I was fairly young then, and what I remember most is this push with the products that we purchased, like you were looking to see if that kind of apartheid support was on the back. And I can remember being in high school and being excited to have my own paycheck. And even as a high school student, I was really mindful about the items that I purchased. I'm checking the back of products. And once I learned that he had been free, it felt surreal, absolutely unbelievable. And you're just looking like, okay, like exactly what happened. And it was just a long overdue and just beautiful moment for a man that gave so much. So that's when I reflect back, it takes me back so many years, but we're so grateful and can learn so much from how he went about advocating for change.
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a really good question, Ben. By the time of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the trial advocacy program was continuing and does still continue. It really is still this very important vehicle in the formation of lawyering and skill development in the courtroom. So it does continue. I think your question might be getting to what extent it's directly connected. That I am not sure, but I have to assume that there were any number of legal experts a part of that commission who probably also funneled through the Black Lawyers Association and the Trial Advocacy Program. When Ann goes back to Cape Town, she'll check that out for us.
Yeah, I'll put it on my to-do list.
It's in those archives at UWC for sure. Any other questions, thoughts, comments, reflections on the moment of Mandela's freedom? Cool. All right. Well, thank you all very much. Amanda, I guess we're turning it back over to you and we'll close it out.
So I just wanted to thank Rob, Ann, and Grace for speaking today. And we will have a soup next week on Wednesday. This one will be on Zoom instead, but look out for like the signup.com, the sign up for next week's event, and then you'll get the link the day before. And next week's event is on Mission Week, and so the title of that event is Hold On to Hope. But if anyone has any questions, you can reach out to me. But thanks again, Rob, Grace, and Ann, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all.
All right.
Bye.